My father always blames my sister for my mother's death. And now that my little sister called me daddy, he regrets it. I, 24M, am the older brother to my little sibling, 5F. I was always the one who had to take care of my sister. For the sake of privacy, I'll call her Belle. For some background, my parents had me as teenagers. They were 15 and 16 at the time, and even as a kid I could always feel that they regretted having me. After I was born, both my mother and father were practically disowned by their family. My mother had to drop out of high school to take care of me, while my father worked 2 jobs, just to provide. And even then they couldn't afford a home. They lived with my mother's older sister until I was 9, and my father got his GED and managed to get a better job and move us out. Despite the fact our living situation was better, it was clear to me that they believed their lives were ruined because of me. Whenever I misbehaved like any normal child, they'd use the fact that they gave up their lives for me, and I still had the audacity to behave like this. And even when I never misbehaved, they never treated me with much love. I barely got to get new clothing. They'd get my clothes from Goodwill and practically refused to get me anything nice unless they had to: birthdays, parties, meeting friends, and their wedding. My birthdays were always celebrated with the bare minimum. They'd get me a cupcake and a single gift, nothing that I wanted. Despite everything, I was still a child who just wanted their love. But as I grew older, I began to accept I wouldn't get it, and made peace with that. I guess somewhere along the line when my parents realized I gave up on them, as throughout my teen years they, mainly my mother, began to treat me better. But at that point, I wasn't the child who begged for their love anymore. I never received the love of my parents, and I wasn't asking for it anymore. Although I can't say I kept hating them, in fact, my feeling began to feel neutral towards them. In my eyes, we were practically strangers. I never got to know them truly as they raised me with the bare minimum and never had any real conversations with me and never spent any quality time with me. They also knew nothing about me, so them suddenly trying to play parents with me was awkward to say the least. When I was 18, my mother got pregnant, and I guess that was when they gave up on trying to fix things with me as they could have a new child to start over with. They didn't treat me poorly again, but instead it felt like we were strangers living in the same home. When I turned 19, my mother gave birth to a girl, but due to some complications, she didn't end up surviving. This crushed my father. Not only did he begin to resent me for not being as sad as he was over her death. She was barely a mother to me, so there wasn't much to be sad over. But he also blamed his daughter for killing his wife. He was never home after the incident, and I was left taking care of my sister. I ended up having to take a break from college after the time I came home from my classes to my sister screaming with hunger in an unchanged diaper while my father was out drinking. I took care of Belle full-time and called out my father multiple times, but he always got angry and ended the convo with him saying I could always leave Belle at the fire station. I eventually gave up on forcing him to be a father. Despite everything, I truly loved Belle. She was the sweetest and cutest kid. She was almost always smiley and surprisingly slept through the night. Once she was old enough, I enrolled her in daycare and continued my education while working night shifts. I always made sure to leave a good portion of afternoons empty so I could spend time with her. She always knew who her actual father was, and as she grew older, she began to try and spend time with him. I guess as she began to follow him around the house. Of course, that quickly ended after he blew up on her, and she began to fear him. I realized she saw me as a parental figure, despite the fact she knew I was her brother. When she was old enough for preschool, I found out she was telling people I was her father. I never mentioned it to her and just let it be until she gave her Father's Day card she made in preschool to me. I then told her if she wanted, she could call me Dad, and since then, she's been calling me Daddy. My father ended up getting a girlfriend and began to change himself as he stopped drinking, got a better job, and even began to take over on a majority of the bills other than the portion I agreed to pay to stay living here. He never really tried being a father to Belle. He did begin to eat breakfast with us, but that breakfast was spent in silence other than me and Belle talking. Fast forward to a few months ago on Belle's birthday, I had planned a party for her and invited her preschool class. My father ended up attending as I guess his girlfriend thought it would be a good time to meet his daughter as she was the one who looked excited to be here. Anyways, while she was opening gifts, I surprised her with one of those kids' electric cars. She screamed and hugged me, yelling how she loved me and called me Daddy. After the party and after Belle was fast asleep, my father asked me what the hell happened. I was confused till he yelled asking why his daughter was calling me Daddy. I asked him if he seriously didn't know why, and told him that I was the one who raised her. I bought her everything. I celebrated her firsts. I was the one who didn't abandon her. He was quiet and went to bed. Since then, he's tried to play father and talk to her, but he was a stranger to her. She was a sweet girl, so she entertained my father's conversation, but he could tell how awkward she felt, and it was clear it hurt him. Despite how selfish it is, I don't want their relationship to get better. After all, Just as she saw me as her dad, I saw her as my daughter. I graduated college, and I'm looking for a better job so I can move Belle and I into our own home. I may be a bad person for enjoying my father's misery and regret realizing he ruined his chances in having a relationship with his daughter, but I'll never be as bad as him. Edit. Thank you guys for all the support and advice. As people suggested, I might be deleting this post soon to avoid any chance of my father finding out before I'm ready for the custody battle. I'll use the advice you guys gave me. I know it was risky posting it here as people might find out, but I never had anyone to talk to about all of this before, so it was nice to be able to let everything out for the first time. Story 2. My wife told my AP, "I'd rather be 80-year-old me than 20-year-old you, and it haunts me every day." My wife and I were HS sweethearts. We are both 40 and have been together for 25 years. We have 2 children together, 5 and 6. For the past 5 years, I have thought that we are together because we basically grew up together. I met my now GF, 28. I know I'm 12 years older, but I met her at work. She is beautiful and attractive, and I thought she was this new change I wanted. Instead of breaking it off with my ex and do the right thing, I cheated and I got caught. My wife was so gracious about it. She didn't want us to be together anymore. This was a year ago, and I left our house and rented an apartment. We have yet to start divorce, although I don't want to. Neither of us was talking about it. My GF, however, is not so happy about this, and mainly because I left our big house, that's originally my house, to my wife and daughters. I inherited from my grandparents, and it is worth a fortune right now. My GF means that it is my family home, and for me, yes it is. My family is living there, but my GF meant that when we get divorced, my wife has no claim to the house. 3 weeks ago, my GF and I were dropping our daughters with their mother, and my GF went against my wishes and started talking to my wife about the house. My wife was confused and said that the house is hers and her daughter's, and she looked at me all confused, but my GF told her that it was mine, and it was time to move on. My wife then said that my GF should put her nose in other people's business. GF became angry and said that my wife is a hag who is bitter because she's old. My wife smiled and said, "Is your age your only redeeming quality? Because that won't last." Then she said that she'd rather be 80-year-old herself than 20-year-old my GF. She wasn't angry or bitter. She isn't old either. She is 40, like me. Am I so old according to my GF? She's very beautiful too. I don't know what my GF was thinking. I felt so ashamed and angry with myself. My GF was immature and embarrassing. I have been unhappy for months now, but if I broke it off, it means that I have hurt my family for nothing. My wife called me next day and said that maybe we should start talking about divorce. I broke down crying the moment we ended the call. Now every time I see her, I want to be in her arms and cry. Just thinking about 80-year-old her with 80-year-old me beside her. The way we envisioned ourselves every time we saw an elderly couple holding hands or kissing, and we thought, this will be us too. I realized I'd rather have 80-year-old her than 20-year-old anyone. But I have messed that up.